we
Okay,
go.
take it away, Mike.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that nice introduction. Hi, how's everybody doing this evening?
Doing well. Thumbs up.
Doing well. Thank you, David. Glad to hear that. Okay, well, let's try a share screen. Let's see what happens with that. And to tell you what, if you can just give me a thumbs up if you see a praying mantis saying funny things. Yeah, you see that?
Yes.
Okay, that means we're in business. So
Yay.
yay. So with that, off we go. And let's learn how we can build biodiversity to aid and abet the natural enemies, pollinators, and recyclers in our landscape. Well, first, we got to start with a few definitions, I think. First, we'll start with this business of what is a natural enemy. Well, natural enemies are organisms that either kill or impair the reproductive potential of another organism. And in this case, natural enemies really are our friends because the critters we're going to be talking about are the pests in our landscapes, in our gardens, and in our agricultural crops and forests. And these natural enemies are important components of something we call integrated pest management. Now, some of you may be familiar with this concept. If you have been a master gardener, for example, I'll talk about integrated pest management and how that works. But tonight, we're really going to focus on these things called natural enemies. Now, what they do, these natural enemies, they provide what I call critical ecosystem services. Now, you might have heard the term ecosystem service. These are basically things that Mother Nature gives us that benefit us in some way. Now, a lot of the folks I work with, my master naturalists, are involved in scientific outreach, as I am. And we're often confronted with a public that basically fears insects, doesn't understand insects, is confused, and maybe really doesn't like bugs too much. Now, what my belief or what my mission is to help people understand the important roles that insects play in basically helping make the world go around. And the easiest way I find to do this is to focus on these key ecosystem services. Number one, pollination. I think everybody can get their head wrapped around pollination and its importance and why insects help to do this. Number two, biological control. And this is the aiding and abetting Mother Nature to help reduce pest populations that we mentioned before. And finally, insects form a critical link in food webs and food chains. Basically, we have the plant world, which we'll talk about, and we've got charismatic levels of creatures above the plants, things like birds, reptiles, other reptiles, mammals. And it's basically the insects that help to connect that plant world to the upper levels by eating plants and then becoming food for other members higher up the food web. All right, so we'll talk about all these things tonight. Why should we care? Well, because they provide here, according to USDA, about $200 billion of ecosystem services in the form of pollination every year here in the United States. The way I like to think about it, and perhaps this is an easier way to get your head wrapped around, is every third bite of food you take is brought to you by some kind of pollinator, many of which are insects, of course. Now, to get going on this, we're going to have to go back in time just a little bit. We're going to go back about, oh, I don't know, 3.9 billion years when life first began on planet Earth in these great primordial seas. Okay, that's where we believe life probably began. And we're going to fast forward now a little bit to a mere 600 million years ago in these great primordial seas when there were organisms known as the Carophysians. Now, the Carafiscians had figured out the magic of being able to take the energy found in sunlight and capture it at a chemical bond. Okay? These were plants. They could photosynthesize. But in those great primordial seas, I think there was a Carafiscian that looked up on dry land and said, oh my, if I could get up out of this soup, hey, that could all be mine, kind of a territorial imperative. And the first organisms that did this, the first plants that did this, were, of course, the bryophytes, okay, the things we know as the mosses. Now, where do we usually find bryophytes growing? And you can unmute yourself if you like, if you want to weigh in. And I'll just put this caution out right now. For the next hour or so, there's going to be no question too foolish to ask. And if you provide a wrong answer, the worst that can happen is embarrassment among your peers. So you'll be okay. Can anybody tell me, again, where we usually find those bryophytes growing? What do they need? What's the most important thing for them?
Moisture, less sunlight,
Yep,
shade
moisture. That's right, Dave. Why moisture? Why water?
It's the habitat that they thrive the most in.
That's true. That's true. It is the one. And the reason they thrive there is because they lack a vascular system.
Right.
That means to the equation. Who wants a pop quiz? You know, I teach non-majors bio, so I think it's time for a pop quiz. Who can tell me the equation for photosynthesis? And like I said, there's no penalty for a wrong answer, gang. What's the equation for photosynthesis? What's on the left-hand side? Okay. What do we give off? What gas do humans give off?
Dioxide, carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. So that's on the left-hand side. So it's CO2 plus H2O yields sugar plus oxygen. That's why we all like to go out and hug plants, right? Because without the plants, we're not here. So because they lack a vascular system, the water to power photosynthesis has to be absorbed through the cuticle, right? So you're gonna find your mosses in wet places. The next big breakthrough came in kind of a switch in vascularization. Now we have plants with a vascular system, and we call these plants the ferns. This is why we'll hike up Old Rag Mountain or Sugarloaf, and up at the top there, we'll find ferns growing. Why? Because they can put their roots down into the soil, grab water, bring it up to the fronds where the photosynthesis happens. Then the products of photosynthesis, the sugars and the other goodies, get transported through the phloem to feed the plant. So this allowed plants to colonize parts of the planet that were heretofore unavailable because they could go to drier habitats. Now, does anybody know how ferns disperse themselves?
Spores.
Very good. Okay, the next big switch came from a switch from dispersal by spores to dispersal by seeds. And the first plants to do the dispersal by seeds were the thing called the gymnosperms. Okay, gymnosperms include the things like pine trees and spruce trees and ginkgos and those kind of guys, right? So now we have a different mode of dispersal, seed rather than spore. And the next big breakthrough came a little bit later, about 130 million years ago, with the evolution, instead of a naked seed, a seed that was enclosed in a fruit. Now, what is the fruit for? On the angiosperm, an apple or a pear or a peach or a serviceberry or something like that. For what?
To hold the
Mikem, did
seed.
you have an idea? Or
Attracts animals to eat them and then go through the system.
yeah, exactly. You've all heard that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? Well, that's not right, really. Okay, the apple really does want to fall far from the tree because if you fall underneath the shade of your parent, you're not going to thrive. So the fruit is basically a mechanism, as some of you have weighed in the chat here, to basically to attract an animal disperser. That's exactly right. Okay, so now we've got flowering plants, angiosperms with flowers and fruit. When did the first insect arrive on the scene? About 400 million years ago. And does anybody know what that first insect was? What's that look like? Can you see my little pointer there? What's that thing look like?
A silverfish.
That's correct. The silverfish is indeed 400 million years old. Very good. Still around today. Okay, so first we had our bryophytes, right? Okay, the mosses. Next, it was time for the ferns with their sori and the spores, right? And the croziers as they grew, and a vascular system. And boy, about 300 million years ago during the Carboniferous, we had tree ferns the size of liriodendrons, tulip poplar trees. We had dragonflies with a 3-foot wingspan. We had cockroaches this big. And if you went out at nighttime, you might be confronted by an 8.5-foot centipede-like creature that might want to eat you. But fortunately for mammals, oxygen levels decline through time. Insects have very inefficient respiratory systems. They're more or less passive systems. They're not like lungs. And insects got smaller, mammals got larger, which was probably lucky for us. Then came the time of the gymnosperm. Now, I'm pretty good with my plants, but, I was driving across the inter-county connector the other day, and I saw that thing. Does anybody know what kind of gymnosperm that might be?
Technologicus.
Cell tower.
Technological cell phone tower.
Very good. That's what kind. You're right. I thought it might be an Araucaria, a monkey puzzle or Norfolk pine, but gymnosperms look like this. And I think most of you know that they have both male and female cones. And how does the gymnosperm get the pollen, the gamete, from the male cone to the female cone? How's that happen in gymnosperms? How do they pollinate? Wind, 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 wind. Very good, gang. Okay, so sure, they're wind pollinated. Now, is the wind fickle or predictable, would you say? I think wind is fickle. I've tried to fly a kite and sail a boat, and it's fickle. So how does it get around this problem of a fickle wind? Well, it produces tons and tons of pollen. If you got a pine tree in your yard in the springtime, you can write your name on your windshield with so much pollen. So I think somewhere around 130 million years ago, there was a gymnosperm that said, look, I'm taking all my energy, making all this pollen, hoping that the wind takes it to the right place. How about if I enlist the help of another organism, maybe an animal, that can take my pollen from a male part to a female part and accomplish pollination, all right? I could then use resources to maybe grow faster, get bigger, steal the sunshine from my neighbor, things like that. So this was an evolutionary pressure for enlisting the aid of pollinators in this task of pollination. And we believe that is part of the reason for the great diversity we see in the flowering plant world that we don't necessarily see in the gymnosperm world. If you think about gymnosperms in your landscape, you've got pines, you've got spruces, you've got hemlocks, cypress, junipers, ginkgos, yews, larches, pond cypress, chamaecyparis, just a handful. But if you think about the number of flowering plants you got in your landscape, I bet you got hundreds. So how does that work? Well, think about a sunflower. Has anybody ever planted a sunflower? I bet some of you have. What have you seen pollinate your sunflower? What came to pollinate that thing? Bees, good. What else? Flies, maybe. Butterflies, wasps, beetles, absolutely. Very good. And you know those bumblebees, after they visit you, maybe they're going to go up and visit a crabapple or a bluebell or a trout lily. Your pollen's going everywhere. So what does the sunflower do? Sunflower says, look, I'm going to go tubular. I'm going to make a corolla so only the insect with a very long tongue can be my pollinator. Now we've got an evolutionary pressure for an insect to evolve a long tongue to be its pollinator. Plant says, that's pretty cool. Now I'm going to go bluebell. So somebody has to be able to pull down my petals and then reach my nectar inside with their long tongue. Now we've got an evolutionary pressure for the insect to evolve the morphology and behavior to be the pollinator. We call this back and forth basically process between flowering plants and their pollinators coevolution. And we believe it's one of the driving forces for the great diversity we see in the flowering plant world that we don't see in the gymnosperm world. You don't have to be clever to be pollinated by wind. You do have to be clever to be pollinated by an animal, an insect. Who are the animal pollinators? I call them the 3 Bs, the bats, the birds, and the bugs. But of these 3, it's really the insects, the bugs, that are the premier pollinators. Now, what does the insect get from this deal of pollination? What does the insect get? What's the reward here in the deal for the bug? They get nectar, which is carbohydrate. What else? They get pollen, and that's protein. So what the insect gets is protein, fat, starch, and sugars, and nectar, carbohydrates, and amino acid. What does the plant get from the deal? Well, it gets reliable transfer of gametes, pollination or sex, right? Food for sex, some would think, is a good deal. This is the comet orchid. It was discovered by Darwin in Madagascar. The comet orchid has a 13-inch corolla. Darwin said, man, there must be some animal around with a really long tongue that's the pollinator. Unfortunately, Darwin did not live to see the discovery of a hawk moth with a 13-inch tongue, which is the pollinator for the comet orchid. Kind of proof of concept of this co-evolutionary process I'm talking about. Okay? Pollination. Now, who were the first insect pollinators, do you suppose? How many think it might be the bee? No? Okay, how about the butterfly? No? Somebody saying beetles? Really? How about the fly? Okay, you guys got me. It's the beetles, right? And they were probably in the game. They were probably in the game more or less for the pollen, for the protein source, more so than the nectar. The pollen to make their eggs, the food source for the females to develop their eggs. Okay, good stuff. Now, beetles come in many different sizes and shapes. If you go into the meadow right this time of year, you're going to see the goldenrod longhorn beetle. I was out there yesterday, and you know, these guys were just out there by the dozens feeding in the goldenrod. Now, the adult stage of that beetle.
You can come.
Oops, let me mute this. I can see that.
Isn't worth it. Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm videotaping, making videos, I say strange things that probably you don't need to hear tonight. The adult stage of this is a yellow jacket mimic, obviously, yellow and black, right? Birds learn very early not to mess with yellow jackets. But the immature stage bores in Robinia, in black locust. If you ever seen a black locust tree trunk and it's got big holes in it, it's caused by the larva of that beetle. So insects will have different things they do in different life stages. This is the point I want to make here. Many of these beetles are also predators. Okay, so here we have the pretty 6-spotted green tiger beetle. You'll see this one along the trails out your way in the springtime. Here it is feeding on a caterpillar, a pest in your garden. This is another one. This is called the fiery hunter. This is a ground beetle, but this ground beetle will climb up into an oak tree and eat gypsy moth caterpillars, or in this case, this one's eating a fall webworm. Excuse me, a fall cankerworm. So these play an important role in this business of biological control, controlling pests in our trees and shrubs and landscapes.
There's murder and mayhem afoot in the canopy of the trees.
Okay. Now, this is one we also see. They start to show up in my garden, usually long about June. These are called Pennsylvania soldier beetles. I bet you've seen them in your gardens. Now, the Pennsylvania soldier beetle, as you can see, the adults are pollinators. They're feeding on pollen. The female obviously can multitask as she works around the flower head looking for some pollen for her eggs to develop. But let me show you what the immature stage does. The immature stage is also found up in the blossom, but what they're doing in the blossom is they're hunting things like aphids and spider mites and thrips. They're biological control agents. So now we have two ecosystem services being provided by two different life cycles of the same species. The adult being a pollinator, the immature stage being a predator. And you'll see these little larvae running across your driveway like I did yesterday. These are the immature stage of the Pennsylvania soldier beetle. So to have this second ecosystem service that I've just talked about, the service of this larva up in the blossom eating pests, what must you have in your garden to get this ecosystem service from this particular species? What has to be there? What does the adult need to eat? What's the adult doing, guys? Flowers. Flowers. To create ecosystem service and biodiversity in a landscape, I think the best way to do this is to have a constant array of flowering plants, because now you provide the key resource that the adult stage needs. And when the adult stage is there, it can become resident in your landscape and lay eggs. And now you get the second ecosystem service of biological control. Okay? Is it the margin leatherwing? Well, that could be the other name for it, I guess. They are the other common name for these guys are leatherwings or soldier beetles, same thing. Okay, everybody got it. If you don't take anything home from what I say tonight, please understand that to provide these ecosystem services and build biodiversity landscape, I think the best way to do it is to have flowering plants, because now you provide the resources for both life stages of these beneficial insects that you'd like to have in your garden. Let's talk about butterflies for just a minute. Mute this. What I want you to do is watch. These are the antennae, obviously, right? This is the proboscis. I want you to look and see how long she actually puts her proboscis into the floret to sip the nectar. I'll let this run for another second or two. Okay. How many seconds does she dip in there for the nectar? 20 minutes? Half hour? 2 seconds?
2 seconds.
Yeah, 3 seconds. Why? Why doesn't she just sit there for 20 minutes and get everything she needs?
survival. She needs to keep moving.
No, she's on the same blossom.
Mm.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. But no, she's on the same floret. She hasn't moved. She wants to leave some for later others. I love that idea. She's altruistic. Some insects we think are perhaps altruistic. Things like ants. There's not that much there. That's exactly right. So what is the plant doing? It's metering out only tiny dribs and drabs to ensure maximize. She has to go from blossom to blossom, maximizing the transfer of pollen. Plants are very clever. Plants are very manipulative. Okay, we don't think of them that way, but plants are manipulating their pollinators by blooming at certain times of the day. If you've ever had an Easter lily, you've noticed that it's not fragrant during the daytime. It's most fragrant in the evening and nighttime. Why? Because it's pollinated by night flying bats and moths. Claytonia, spring beauties, okay? My friend Sam Droege says that there's probably only 1 or 2 species of native bees that pollinate things like Claytonia, spring beauty. And that will only release its pollen between like 10 and 2 banker's hours. So plants are utilizing different pollinators at different times of days with different fragrances. Okay, they're really quite complex and very clever. Now, we also have moths that are pollinators, right? We've got these pretty bumblebee moths, or some people call them hummingbird moths. Most of our moths, however, are nighttime pollinators or simply don't feed at all. They get all their nutrition they need as caterpillars or larvae. But these are fascinating to me, and I always love to see these guys when they're in my garden. Now, why are they important? It's like I said before, gang. Basically, you have your plant world, your primary producers. The next guys up are the primary consumers, things like caterpillars. They form the basis for everybody else above, including so many birds, right? They feed more than 80% of the birds in the United States. Okay, so again, pollinators, critically important as both larval and adult stages. Bees. Bees are special. Bees are special. I'll let you see this one work. They're super important pollinators, but they're special. Let's try to figure out why. Watch as this particular bee, this honeybee, pulls down the petal. It's going to squeeze this structure right here. That's where the pollen is. Watch. You'll see it squeeze it with its jaws. A little drop of orange pollen comes out, gets carried in the pollen basket. Behavior and morphology. You'll see an instant replay on this, but while you're watching this, I want you to think about, why am I saying that bees are special or different than some of these other pollinators? Think about that for just a minute. There's your pollen. Front leg, middle leg, hind leg, off I go. Okay. Why are bees special? Why are they different than, let's say, a monarch butterfly? When the monarch butterfly pollinates a plant and lays her egg on the milkweed, does she hang around and say, "Oh, darling, please have another bite of milkweed"? Nah. Well, they can manipulate flowers. They do spread it, yeah. Okay, let's try it this way. Who's the pollen for? Is it for the bee? When the monarch butterfly sips nectar, that nectar's for her. Thank you very much, Terry, for their young. For their young. That's exactly right. That's what makes them special. It's not for the bee. It's for their young. Okay. Or the hive. Yes. But we will talk more about honeybees, but please, let's set aside honeybees for a little while. I think you all know that honeybees are not native bees. And I guarantee you, Over in, Charles County 1,000 years ago, the place looked great before we had honeybees brought over by colonists. So who was pollinating the plants over there? It was our native pollinators, our native bees. And those are the ones we're going to spend some time with. Okay, our native bees. Now, we do have social bees. Again, honeybees are social bees, meaning we have a queen. The queen lays eggs. The eggs hatch. They're all sisters, all the workers. They report into their mother that tells them to, go out and get nectar and pollen, bring it home. Let's make some honey. We'll feed the babies. When Winnie the Pooh comes, to get the honey and the brood, mom says, go out and kill the bear. So she's running the show. We do have some social bees here as well. Of course, our bumblebees are social bees, right? They have a queen and workers just like honeybees do. But really the ones that are most important, in my opinion, are the native bees. It took me several years to get my backyard thin enough, my lawn thin enough, that I could have a very delightful colony of ground nesting bees. Now, what this bee does is it digs a gallery down in the ground, maybe 18 inches deep. It then builds little lateral chambers. It provisions those chambers with pollen, lays eggs in those chambers, and the bee babies develop underground. Okay. In my yard, this is what part of my colony looks like. And there'll be a day in May when the males emerge and they'll fly around waiting for the females to emerge. And at any given time, there might be 3,000 or 4,000 of these bees buzzing 1 foot off the ground. So many of these bees are there that one year my neighbor who has a lawn care company came into her yard to apply pesticides. And they took one look in my backyard and they said, we're not going back there today. Okay. So this is like my security system in the backyard, my ground nesting bees. Now, oftentimes I'll get a phone call and somebody will say something like, oh man, I was out there golfing today and there were all these bees flying around the green. What should I do? What can I kill them with? And I say, well, why would you want to kill these? These are native pollinators that are helping make our world go around. Well, they might sting me. Well, let's think that one through for a second. You can see me holding a bee here, right? I'm holding one of these bees. I have a wonderful video of my granddaughter at 3 years old petting one of these bees saying, you love me, little bee, don't you? Why wouldn't these bees be aggressive? Think it through. Tell me why those solitary bees are not aggressive bees. Why they don't really want to sting you very much. No time? I think they got time to sting you. Yeah, they don't have a hive to protect. It's just her and her babies. If they sting you and this happens, what happens to the babies? The babies die. These are very docile bees. You probably have been stung by one of these bees. If you ever worked in the garden and you get this little thing in the crook of your arm, it's drinking your perspiration. They're called sweat bees. You'll feel a little prick, okay? You've been stung by one of these things. They don't have a painful sting. They are not aggressive. Why? Because if they risk death and die, it's over for the babies. Whereas in a honeybee hive, the queen just says, oh, here comes the bear, go out and sting that thing. Well, I'm going to lose a few. Russian infantry, go sting the bear. I'll lose some, but I'll just make more. Okay, these bees can't afford to do that. Okay. There are also leafcutter bees. These cute little bees cut these almost perfectly semicircular portions of leaves. They'll find a hole in a tree. They'll make a little wrapper, like a cigar wrapper, provision it with pollen, and lay their eggs in those. Leafcutter bees. Native pollinators. Well, this is a non-native, but it also is a leafcutter that was imported. Anybody here have a mason bee colony? Any mason beers? Yes, great. Me too. I started my colony many years ago with about, I don't know, 40 of these tubes. They all got filled up. So in the second year, I got 40 more. They all got filled up. And then I just started using my old firewood. And as many holes as I put out there, they would get filled up. Now, inside those holes, the females will bring in pollen and nectar and make little pollen cakes. They'll lay eggs on a pollen cake. Each one gets an egg. And there might be 8 or 10 or 12 of these in each hole. Okay. Usually the first day of spring, they start to emerge, and I keep this in my carport. They're called mason bees because after they've filled up the holes, they will seal it off with a little bit of mud, mason bees. Okay, and when they start to emerge for about a solid month, I will have maybe 3 or 4,000 of these bees, very docile bees, as you can see here, buzzing around my carport. Okay, and for a solid month, there won't be one Amazon delivery, UPS delivery, any delivery at my carport door. So I've got ground nesting bees, security in the backyard. I've got mason bees, security in the carport. So these are my security systems, but they're very valuable and important. Um, Very valuable and important pollinators. Yes, and mason bees and native plant pots or plots. Yeah, sure. These are important native pollinators. The blue orchard mason bee is out pollinating our things like our fruit trees in the springtime. Sure, you bet. These are beautiful, right? These are halictid bees, Ogochlora. I mean, look at this one. It looks like she's got saddlebags on. Look at the pollen on this coneflower. And they're out from the time of the very first mustards, the brassicas, and the swales. And, you know, if you just plant these flowering plants in your gardens, you'll have these attractive and important pollinators. Let's talk about honeybees briefly. As I said, they're non-native bees. They were brought over primarily to pollinate non-native crops. I get amused when people say I don't like non-native plants, and I say, oh my, don't you look very healthy for somebody eating persimmons, pawpaws, Jerusalem artichokes, and huckleberries. I hope you understand that every plant you eat is a non-native plant. Okay, our food plants are non-native plants, and honeybees pollinate these things, no question. Now, they evolved to live in the hollow of a tree, right? Like this. They didn't evolve to live in a white box that gets transported thousands of miles pollinating crops each year. This is part of the stress that's involved with honeybees, commercial honeybees, not so much native honeybees. People ask, why are bees disappearing? Well, it's a complex phenomenon. Let me back to this. It involves things like the importation of a parasitic mite called Varroa mite, which transmits several different kinds of viruses. It's a matter of their being exposed to environmental pollutants like pesticides and herbicides. And finally, many times we ask them to eat food plants that frankly aren't that healthy. We use honeybees to pollinate the almond crop in California. It takes 1.5 million beehives to pollinate a non-native plant in the desert in California. And if you watch honeybees, they like a diverse diet like we do. You'll see them on weeds, you'll see them in trees, you'll see them on flowers. So when we ask them to pollinate a single plant in the desert, which frankly might not be as nutritious as a varied diet, then they have kind of a physiological stress related to their host plant. So there's a big complex of events and factors that are basically decimating, particularly our commercial beekeepers. Last year was the worst year on record for honeybee failure. I think it was 60% of commercial hives failed last year. When I was a kid growing up in New Jersey, we had beehives. We lost our colonies when the Varroa mite arrived in the late 1980s. So it's a big complex set of things that are affecting our poor honeybees right now. Wasps are important pollinators too. Wasps, in my opinion, get a really bad rep. They're super important pollinators. This is called one of the big black wasps. It's in the genus Sphex. It's pollinating spotted horseman, which is one of my favorite plants in the garden. As you can see, I'll rerun this again. Here are the reproductive parts. The anther and the pistil are here, but the nectar is down there. So when this wasp pollinates the plant, you'll see the anthers touch on its back, and the back of the wasp will actually be yellow, covered in pollen. So I think this particular plant is basically using these large native wasps as its pollination source. Watch again, and you'll notice how the back of the wasp is covered with yellow pollen. See the pollen here? I just think that's so cool. All right, there's another wasp I see on my spotted horsemen. This is called the thread-waisted wasp. And again, this one, that female can multitask. The male will remain coupled with her for a very long period of time, okay? This ensures that it's his sperm that will be used to fertilize her eggs. This is why we often see insects in tandem for long periods of time. But when they're not pollinating plants, they're out there capturing caterpillars that are feeding on your garden plants and laying eggs on them. They are parasites of caterpillars. Okay, so highly beneficial in that regard. Flies are also important pollinators. You can see the mouth parts here, and really the fly's in the game primarily for nectar, not so much maybe for the pollen, more for the nectar. But you can see as it collects the nectar, its body parts like its eyes and its legs and its mouth part will pick up the pollen grains, and it will transfer that pollen from plant to plant. There are many different species of flies that are pollinators. I want to focus on this one right here. This is called the featherleg fly. The featherleg fly will find a pest like a squash bug or another hemipteran. It will lay eggs. You can see the 3 eggs. Those eggs will hatch. They'll bore through the exoskeleton of that pest and kill it. Now, some of you may remember, the years of about 2005 and 2006 when we were invaded by brown marmorated stink bugs. Remember all those stink bugs that used to come in your house about this time of year, the first day of autumn? Well, guess what? This fly, instead of attacking native pests, now attacks brown marmorated stink bugs and kills them, and is part of the reason we have fewer stink bugs now than we did 20 years ago when that pest first arrived. Let's talk a little bit more about some of these biocontrol agents. Our natural enemies, predators, parasites, and pathogens capable of reducing pests to tolerable levels. The idea that we can eradicate, extirpate, annihilate, eliminate a pest from a landscape is folly. We simply cannot do this. What we would like to do is simply reduce densities of pests in our gardens and landscapes to a tolerable level. And it's these biological control agents that help us do this. How are you guys liking spotted lanternfly? Not so much?
Much.
How much are you guys seeing spotted lanternfly down in your neck of the woods? I think all of Southern Maryland has it now, right? Maybe St. Mary's. Yeah, only one record, but too fast. Yeah, okay, it's really, really fast. Okay, so look, you now have thousands of these spotted lanternflies that are breeding. They really, really love Tree of Heaven. That's one of their most favorite and important hosts. They excrete a sugary liquid called honeydew that fouls the plants below. The honeydew provides a substrate for the growth of black sooty mold, which is really, really nasty. Okay, so spotted lanternflies. Now, what they said early on in the infestation here in Maryland, as with many other insect pests arriving to the United States from other parts of the world and finding no established natural enemies here, it has become very invasive. This is pretty much something that we hear almost all the time from the press when we have a new invasive pest. And frankly, it doesn't always make a lot of sense, and it often doesn't really hold up or ring true. So now we know that we've had more than 500 attacks by things like spiders, mantises, wasps, and predatory assassin bugs. 500 attacks by more than 20 families of birds. So remember what I said about these natural enemies being part of Mother Nature's hit squad that basically helps to reduce invasive pest populations. So yes, indeed, there are indigenous natural enemies here that are helping to control spotted lanternflies. Let's play what's this, what's that. Can anybody tell me what this is?
It looks like a mantis egg case.
Yeah.
Very good. Which one? Chinese or Carolina?
It looks like
Chinese.
Chinese.
Very good. Okay, then what's that?
Whoa.
I can't see it.
It's a spotted lanternfly egg case, exactly right. So these mantises know exactly where to put their eggs. So when those eggs hatch, they'll have something tasty to eat. Remember, both of these things are from Asia. Now, it just so turned out that last year in my front flower bed, I had a Chinese praying mantis. I often do. This is an apex predator of the invertebrate food web, the top carnivore. This is a mountain lion or an eagle in my landscape. So what I did is I invited her in. I invited her in to see my lanternfly collection. She seemed interested. She jumped down in the terrarium. She grabbed one lanternfly in one arm, a second lanternfly in the other arm, proceeded to eat the thorax. She then dined on leg of lanternfly before going for the sweetbreads. Now, basically, she would eat as many spotted lanternflies as I would feed her, leaving behind only the wings. Okay, so again, tremendous predator. And remember now, the Chinese mantis evolved with the spotted lanternfly back over in China. They've been evolving for millions of years. So this is very much like Hannibal Lecter having an old friend over for lunch, as simple as that, right? They know what to do with this. Okay, so highly valuable in terms of biocontrol. Go on to the next one. Now, I also have a Carolina mantis in my landscape. Let's see what she did with the spotted lanternfly. Well, she was much more demure. She started on the eyeball and ate the eyeball off before she continued on. But whereas the Chinese mantis would eat as many as I gave her, this one only ate a couple lanternflies at a time. So again, praying mantises, very important in helping control these invasive pests. They also eat things like brown marmorated stink bugs. Again, here's our food web. Here's our plants. Here's our primary consumers, many of which are insects. But in the invert world, in the invertebrate world, this is an apex predator, your praying mantises. So when I see a mantis in somebody's landscape in a garden, I say all those other levels in that food web have to be intact. This is a highly functional food web when you have praying mantises in it. Follow?
Yeah.
Okay. Ladybird beetles, they're important predators too, but what do the adult stage of ladybird beetles do? Well, they're pollinators. Okay, some eat pests, but sure, they'll eat pollen as well. Now, the immature stages, she'll lay 600 eggs a year. These eggs hatch into this monster that'll eat 1,000 aphids during the course of its development. So ladybird beetles, again, important predators, but the adult stages also eat nectar and pollen. The heroes of the fly world. These flies are called syrphid flies or hover flies. If you've ever worked in the garden and you see this little fly that can fly like a helicopter, it can go up, it can hover, it goes back and forth. These are called hover flies. Many of them, as you can see, are bee or yellow jacket mimics, right? I'm going to play you a little silent movie. I'll narrate as we go along. So in the summertime, we have aphids on our plants. Now, aphids in the summertime can reproduce very, very rapidly. Okay, it's just grandma, mom, and the granddaughter sitting there sucking sap. They're parthenogenetic, meaning no males. They reproduce, give live birth. Here you can see the hoverfly. See it hovering? What she's doing is tanking up on nectar so she can go out and hunt aphids. When she finds the aphid colony, she'll lay an egg, and in a fairly short suspense, a matter of days, the egg will hatch, and the larvae of that flower fly will hunt and kill aphids. It grabs the aphid with a mouth hook. The other mouth part pokes holes in the aphid, and it sucks the juice out. But as I watched this video, as I watched this predator work, this fly larva, I also noticed as time went by that aphids are not clever. So watch on here for just another few seconds and you'll see what I mean about that.
Delmarva's needs leader. Travel consideration provided by.
Best deal ever is back. Any hand toss pan-
Okay, so this murder and mayhem goes on day and night, year after year, all the time. Okay, this goes on in your gardens as well as my garden if, again, you have the critical resource. And again, the critical resource in this case is what?
6,001. James Fadgety was in second place.
What are all the adults doing?
His response was.
Yeah,
They're all pollinators, right?
Flowers.
Good.
$200.
These are lacewings, the beautiful green lacewing and its cousin, the brown lacewing. Again, adult stage pollinator, immature stage maniacal predators that feed on a variety of pests in our gardens and landscapes. Watch this one. It has hollow jaws. The jaws are saber-like. It will grab the aphid with the jaws. It will then inject proteolytic enzymes that digest the internal organs of the aphid, liquefying it. It then turns on a little hydraulic pump in its head and it sucks out the liquefied tissues of the aphid. It gives the aphid kind of a deflated feeling. Okay. After developing as a larva, it will form a chrysalis attached to the bottom of the leaf. From the chrysalis will emerge the beautiful green lacewing adult. She'll then lay eggs on the plant. The eggs hatch into larvae. But again, to have this ecosystem service I've talked about of biological control, you must have the flowering plants to support your adults. Okay, I'm going to skip this for the sake of time because I see that I'm already almost at 8 o'clock. We started just a tad late here. So I think I'm going to skip through. I know we're supposed to be on from 7 to 8, I think, right? Is that a thumbs up?
Yes.
Yeah, somebody asked about Chinese and narrow-winged have fewer yellow. Okay, somebody answered this question. Okay. The other thing about the Chinese and the Carolina mantis, the wings don't usually cover the abdomen. On the Chinese mantis, the wings will cover the abdomen. The Carolina mantis usually have a little macula, a little dark spot on the hind wings as well. So that's how we tell some of the differences in these guys. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to escape this piece. This is part of a much longer talk. I usually take about an hour and a half to talk about the different elements, but I want to skip now to last few slides. I'll probably wrap up here in just a little while. Yeah, a little while. Yeah. Okay, maybe give me another 5 or 10 minutes and we'll put a wrap on this. So what then can you do? What are some of the things you can do to have these benefits that I've talked about here provided by these natural enemies? So let's go. Okay. We call this conservation biological control, and what it is a deliberate attempt to maintain these natural enemies, these pollinators in our landscape nurseries. I work a lot with nursery growers and parks as well as residential landscapes. We can do it two ways. We can either enhance the natural habitat in some way to increase survival and reproduction, or we can employ practices that are less harmful for these beneficial insects. So let's go there a little bit. Again, provide diverse nectar and pollen sources, food plants for the immature stages of butterflies and moths. Milkweed, again, milkweed for your monarchs. You're going to want to have a spice bush for the spice bush caterpillar. Of course, we already have pawpaws along the Potomac, right, and the Patuxent that are the host for, again, the pretty zebra swallowtail. And provide undisturbed nest sites. I've talked about that bare area in my yard that became a nursery for those ground nesting bees. And whenever we can, let's try to find alternatives to pesticides for managing our pests. Let's touch on each of these things. What is the importance of flowering plants? Well, here's a very simple landscape, 3 azaleas in a mulch bed. This is work done by my colleague Paula Shrewsbury and her grad students. The simple question was, what happens if we simply add a couple species of flowering plants to these plots? Now, you may know that azaleas are attacked by a pest called the azalea lacebug. It's the most common pest in Maryland of ornamental plants because we have so many azaleas. Well, what happens when we add these flowering plants? We provide microclimates because now we have shade. We have alternate food sources. We have nectar and pollen, but we also have prey that come in to feed on these flowers. So there now are prey here for predators. What happens is we quadruple the number of these natural enemies. So in the plots where we have the flowers, we've quadrupled or doubled or tripled the number of beneficial natural enemies simply by adding flower plants. And that lowers the density of those pest lace bugs that are there because now there are predators there to eat the lace bugs. What are some of the good plants to use? Well, members of the Lamaceae, this is the mint family, things like eupatoriums, monardas, pycnanthemum. I'm sorry, the eupatorium is going to be in the aster family. Coreopsis, cornflowers, asters are super attractors as well. Some of the asclepiads aren't bad, the milkweeds, and there are actually some grasses that contribute somewhat. But in this particular study, the big winners were the asters and the mints. If you want a good publication, I think this is an excellent publication. This was done by a coalition of several different scientists, Michigan State, University of Maryland, Rutgers University. And what it provide you with is a whole array of flowering plants that are attractive to bees. Here are annuals. And if they're attracting bees, they're attracting these other beneficial insects. Annuals, perennials, shrubs, trees, wildflowers. So there are tables and tables in that publication to help you learn what some of the things are you could plant in your gardens and landscapes to attract these beneficial insects. Another great resource, which you may be familiar with, are the publications by the Xerces Society. This is a society for the conservation of invertebrates, things like bees and butterflies. This is a great resource, attracting native pollinators to your landscape. I want to talk a little bit about alternative for pesticides. I've done a lot of research on the effects of pesticides on insect populations in communities, in landscapes. What I do know is when we use long-lasting residual insecticides like organophosphate pesticides, we reduce the populations of these beneficial insects, the natural enemies, as much as 6 weeks after the application of the pesticide. Where if we used an OMRI listed material, one labeled for organic food production like horticultural oil, there's no significant difference between the plants we treated with horticultural oil and the untreated plants. Okay, so your choice of insecticides is going to be critically important to help conserve beneficial insects. My approach to pest control is to do nothing, to maybe see if those natural enemies I talked about are present in your garden and are reducing the pest populations. If that's not happening, then I'm going to get busy. I do a lot of hand picking. I crush colonies of aphids. If I have hornworms on my plants that aren't being parasitized, I remove them. If I've got webworms at the end of my branches on a persimmon tree, I simply prune them off or remove the nest manually. Okay. And when I'm growing my garden to keep the cucumber beetles off and the squash bugs off, I'm going to cover them with floating row covers in the springtime to keep the pests off rather than spraying them with insecticides. And finally, when all these other things failed, then I might get lazy and I might actually spray these pests with an insecticide. Now, I will be honest with you, in my landscape, I use virtually no insecticides. Okay, Mother Nature, my landscape is diverse by virtue of the great number of flowering plants and habitats I have. So I have very, very little need for pesticides in my garden. If you're going to go the chemical route, this is what I want you to do. I want you to use materials that have been listed by the Organic Materials Review Institute. When you buy your broccoli from Whole Foods and it says it's organic, that doesn't mean it hasn't been treated with an insecticide. If there was an aphid on there and they had to control it, they simply used an OMRI listed insecticide, a material so safe it's been approved for use on organic crops. And those are the ones I would like you to use if you decide you need to do something like that. Okay, you'll see this symbol on the label. So what are some of these OMRI listed materials? Well, here's one of my favorites. It's called spinosad. Always learn your active ingredients too. Don't bother with these crazy trade names. They mean nothing. Always look on your label and it will have your active ingredients. That's what you need to learn. That's what I always look for. And I'm always going to look for my OMRI label right here. Okay. It controls caterpillars, sawfly larvae, leaf beetles, leaf mining flies, and some gall makers. Horticultural oil, okay? Again, it's going to have the OMRI label, and this works very nicely against a very broad variety of insect pests and also mite pests. Always read your labels too. There are going to be cautions on those labels about what plants might be sensitive and what conditions might be sensitive. You might not want to be applying a horticultural oil or a neem oil on a day where it's 90 degrees and 90% humidity because it may cause phytotoxicity on your plant leaves. So always read your labels and follow those labels. Neem oil, again, derived from a botanical plant. Azadirachtin, the neem plant, kills aphids, caterpillars, beetles, leaf miners, a whole variety of pests. BTs, we use this one against caterpillars, hornworms, cabbage worms, tent caterpillars, gypsy moth. Insecticidal soaps have a broad label as well. Pyrethrum, okay, derived from chrysanthemums, a very, very large label. Now, I have to be honest with you folks. Some of the things listed on this label, for example, European pine tip moth, that bores into the tips of pine trees. Do I really believe I can kill that particular boring moth with a contact insecticide? I don't really think so. Okay, so it's a kind of buyer beware, but pyrethrums are very, very good contact materials. And to kind of wind up, how can we enhance the sustainability of our landscapes? Well, we've got to increase biodiversity, and that's got to happen at a genetic level, species, plant level, community level. We need, in particular, more plants and more flowering plants. And when we're choosing our plants, if at all possible, choose native plants because they're going to provide the resources that our native insects need. I'm not saying you can't have a non-native plant. If you wanted to have a rose in your garden, I think that's entirely up to you, okay? But if by planting native plants, now we can attract the native caterpillars that feed your birds, we can attract native pollinators that will pollinate your gardens and then provide that second biocontrol service I talked about. We need to reduce the threats of importing exotic species like spotted lanternflies or emerald ash borers or brown marmorated stink bugs. This is going to be a result of legislation. We have to find people that understand the importance of these pests in our landscapes, but also the tools and education so we can help detect and destroy these things when they get here. The big gorilla, in my opinion, is climate change. We've got to find ways to cool this planet down. And it's going to depend on lots of things, reducing fossil fuels, for example, but also planting more green plants. Remember the equation for photosynthesis. CO2 plus H2O makes sugar and oxygen. Plants lock up carbon. They take carbon out of the atmosphere and lock it up in a tissue. More plants take more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Okay, so it's a win-win by planting more plants, having more green space. And when we can, when we develop our cities, we would like to replace impervious surface, concrete, with pervious surface, parks, grasses, even sidewalks or driveways can be made with pervious materials to let water penetrate into the earth rather than run off and into our Chesapeake Bay or our waterways. So again, cut down the amount of impervious surface in the built environment. Okay, I've already talked about the insecticides, and we always want to apply these on a prescription basis when we see the pest rather than a broadcast application. You know, we spray a landscape once a month in April, May, and June. That makes no sense. Okay, what makes sense is we see lace bugs on an azalea and we treat that plant. That makes sense. Okay, so again, follow those guidance. Okay, so I've taken a little bit more time than what was allotted. I do apologize for that. I would be happy if you're going to hang around for a little while. Let me go ahead through the chats first. Is that okay? Do we have time to
Yeah.
do some chats and
Yes,
stuff like that?
definitely.
Could you
Mhm.
say something about mosquito spraying? My neighborhood sprays, I've been able to request at my house and 300 feet around my house. Exempt, good for you. However, I'm unclear how mosquito spraying affects other insects. It kills other insects. There's no mystery here. It kills mosquitoes, it kills other insects. All right, it's as simple as that. I choose not to do this. All right, my landscape, as you might guess, most of those videos you saw tonight came from my blog. I have a blog, it's called Bug of the Week. If you enjoyed some of those videos, every week there's a new story about some insect I've seen. I've been doing this for more than 20 years now. So whatever 20 times 52 weeks, that's how many stories there are in the archive. I wager that any bug that's ever crawled across your bathroom floor, you discovered on your tomatoes, you saw it in your oak tree, or you were in the tropical rainforest in Borneo and you saw this thing, you will find it Bug of the Week. There's also a YouTube channel called YouTube Bug of the Week, and every Monday I publish new videos of interesting bugs here in the DMV and around the world, so you might want to check that out. But to back out here to this point, my landscape is meant to be a place, a sanctuary for me to do photography and videography and for my grandchildren to play. So there are very few pesticides and certainly no broadcast mosquito sprays that are applied to my landscape. But this, I understand, is a personal choice. If you have mosquitoes that are driving you nuts and you need to eliminate this and you want to have this service, then by all means do this. So I think you have dominion over your own little piece of property. And again, as I said, this is a very personal choice. So I do other things. I get rid of all the breeding sources for my mosquitoes, dump all the water. If I have water I can't drain, I put BT dunks in a pool of water that's going to stand for 2 weeks. It kills the larvae. I put BT dunks in my drain pipes because I can't empty my drain pipes. I unclog my gutters. And when I work outdoors, I use mosquito repellents. The 3 I like, I use oil of lemon eucalyptus if I'm going to work outdoors for, let's say, 3 or 4 hours. If I'm going to be outside all day working in the yard, I'm going to use the active ingredient picaridin, which is going to give me just as good control of mosquitoes as DEET. And if I'm going into the tropical rainforest where there's yellow fever and malaria, I'm probably going to use DEET. Okay, so it's going to be a variety of things that I use depending on what circumstances are taking place. But again, a very personal choice, but certainly the chemicals that are being applied to control mosquitoes are going to kill other small insects. There was a good study done in Israel that showed that these things will kill many small insects. Some of the larger insects may not be killed by mosquito fogging or mosquito sprays, but other insects will be. Okay, it's just how it is. Kills fireflies, find mosquito dunks in ponds. We've talked about that. Maybe those sprays. I haven't seen data on mosquito sprays killing fireflies, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised if it did. I just haven't seen data on that. I'm happy with the mosquitoes. They feed our bats. I love this. I would love to have something to say about mosquito spraying to my neighbor. Again, as I said, it's really a personal choice, and it depends what you're doing in your landscape. As I said, my landscape is a sanctuary for all the critters I showed you tonight, and I don't think mosquito sprays in that place are good for the bugs. And you know, when the grandkids come over, I make sure that I put a little mosquito repellent on them if they're being bothered. Thank you for Bug of the Week. Oh, somebody listens. Lisa, you do Bug of the Week. Thank you so much. Great info. Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Well, thank you all. Does anybody else have a question? You can unmute if you want to chat about something. Perhaps we'll do this another time. I just gave a talk to the the Natural History Society of Maryland, and it was on Lepidoptera. So that's another interesting talk. Perhaps we'll do this another time for you folks as well. Anybody else have something? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. That was excellent, Mike. I know I've really enjoyed it.
Oh,
I
good. Thank you
really,
so
really-
much. Yeah, I do appreciate it. It's always fun to chat and tell you some bug stories. And again, if I can ever help out, and please don't be strangers. If you guys see a really cool bug, you have my email. I often use pictures I receive from folks here in the DMV, and they'll form the basis for one of my episodes of Bug of the Week. So if you see a weird, cool bug, send it up to me, and I'll try to help identify it for you, and perhaps use it as a storyline for one of my blog posts or my YouTube. So always, I need new material all the time, as you might guess.
Great. Well,
Okay.
thanks a lot, Mike, and I'll be back in touch with you. But I wanted to thank you so much for tonight, and you kind of addressed questions as we went along, so that's all taken care of. So I want to say good night. Thank you very much.
Okay, gang, thanks a lot for joining me. Have fun out there, and hey, enjoy those birds. They're feeding on the bugs and help making the world go around too. So gotta love those birds. I spent a lot of time taking pictures of birds too, but the focus for tonight was bugs as well. So okay, gang, have a good evening, and we'll catch up with you another time.
Good night.
Good night now.
Thank you
Nice, thank
so
you.
much.
You're welcome.